Humanity has often gone through profound social change when new technology enters the picture. From the introduction of farming to the printing press. With new technologies and media, social structures begin to change and take on new identities. Never since the printing press has humanity had larger or easier access to information than in the age of the internet. Contemporary writers have confronted this current information age and the questions that have come from how it will affect humanity's social interactions, politics, and most importantly for this video, storytelling. The cultural landscape of the internet is a constantly and rapidly changing place, much of which can be attributed to the literature produced on it, with such examples as the horror stories that were popular in the 2000s called creepypastas, or even Harry Potter fanfiction. It is clearly possible for literary forms to not only have a place in the internet, but also to grow, change, and to flourish. So, come along with me as we explore the literature of the World Wide Web. This is the history of internet fiction. I was going to make this one long video, but when I was talking with a friend about how to organize it, I was really struggling and realized there's just too much information. With the breadth of this topic, it became clear I would have to separate it into many parts, each focusing on a specific fiction found on the internet. Hi, I'm Cameron, and if you're new to my channel, I try to put videos out on books and literature every 2 weeks or so. If you want to see more videos like this and see me improve with each one, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It means a lot, and trying to reach 1,000 subs before the end of the year. Anyways, on to the video. It may seem counterintuitive to start with the internet literature before the internet, but a lot of the traits we associate with fiction produced on the internet started with the computer by itself, and not necessarily the internet itself. So, let's go back to before social media, before brain-rot Instagram Reels, before OnlyFans, and definitely before YouTube. Let's go back to before I was even a thought in my father's brain, or my father in my grandfather's brain. Let's go back to the 1950s. In 1959, Germany, a man by the name of Theo Lutz was working away on a Zeus Z22 computer, putting passages and words from Franz Kafka's The Castle into a database, and then programmed the computer to rearrange all of them to form new and different passages. This is the digital equivalent to taking words from a magazine and rearranging the words to create something new out of them. The computer generated this poem from the words given to it. Not every look is near. No village is late. A castle is free, and every farmer is distant. This would make Lutz the first practitioner of generative digital poetry, and wouldn't be the last. Even today, it's certainly considered something of a controversial topic with the broadening frontier of generative AI. Going beyond that to the 1960s, we would see many more people experimenting with a computer in the literary form. Some of it is generative, with the likes of a Libroscope that developed Auto Beatnik, a program that would generate a poem imitating the style of beatnik poetry. There was also the first narrative text adventure game with Mabel Addis and William McKay's The Sumerian Game. Although somewhat forgotten in the larger video game world, the Sumerian Game was developed by Addis and McKay from 1964 through 1967 as part of a joint project between the Board of Cooperative Educational Services in Westchester, New York, and the company IBM to study how well computers could be used in educational settings. Text adventure games allow for the user to not only read the fiction, but to play the story out with simple commands or phrases, often acting as a middleman between writer and reader. They would hold a workshop in 1962 comprised of 2 members from IBM and a researcher for the board by the name of Dr. Richard Wong, along with 10 teachers, where they would find different ways that simulation games could be used in educational environments. From the results of this workshop, they would receive a grant from the U.S. Department of Education to continue the research. And with this grant, the project officially began in 1963. They held another workshop composed of 9 school teachers to decide on the official program that they would work on. One of these teachers, by the name of Mabel Addis, proposed an expansion of an idea that was presented at the previous workshop. It was an idea for an economic model of a civilization designed to teach students basic economic theory. The proposal would be accepted, and Addis would work alongside a programmer from IBM by the name of William McKay. The game has the player take the role of 3 successive rulers of Samar, where they're tasked with controlling resources in ever-complex economic situations. Since it was made for a classroom, one student was attended to work on the teleprinter, while the other students would work together to make the decisions. Two different versions of the game were made, with the second version being more focused on narrative and employing different multimedia elements to immerse the players in the world of ancient Sumar. One of these being a tape that would be played along with the player of a court of advisors for the ruler, as well as a projector that attempted to immerse the player into the world of ancient Sumeria. It's an interesting piece in not only the history of electronic literature, but video games especially, with it being cited as the first video game with a narrative, as well as the first edutainment game. Mabel Addis, as well, is also cited as one of the first female video game developers. An interesting word would also be coined in this decade that would be much more important when we come into the 1980s. The word hypertext. Coined by Ted Nelson in a 1965 paper he presented at the Association for Computing Machinery called Complex Information Processing, a file structure for the complex, the changing, and the indeterminate. Let me introduce the word hypertext to mean a body of written or pictorial material interconnected in such a complex way that it cannot conveniently be presented or represented on paper. It may contain summaries or maps of its contents and their interrelations. It may contain annotations, additions, and footnotes from scholars who have examined it. Moving on from the 60s to the 1970s with a continuation of interactive text adventure fiction. Though the Sumerian game was mentioned as the first text adventure game, the title of the most influential will most certainly go to Colossal Cave Adventure. Initially developed in 1976 by Will Crowther for the PDP-10 mainframe computer, the game would have multiple iterations and versions. Crowther thought up the idea using maps and times he spent caving at Mammoth Cave, the largest cave system in the world, located in Kentucky. Being the first well-known text adventure game, it has all the staples people would associate with the genre. Descriptions and narratives typed out across the screen with the player using keys or phrases to interact and make choices in the story. The game would be popular through the ARPANET, a precursor to the internet that was connected through different universities. It would be at one of these universities where a man by the name of Don Woods would discover it. Enjoying the game, Woods would reach out through email to Crowther on the ARPANET and gain access to the game's source code. He would add more fantastical elements to the game, such as an introduction of a dragon and more complex puzzles, to even a pirate that runs around the cave system stealing treasure from the player. While there are multiple iterations after this, most of them use Woods' source code as it was the most popular of the two versions. It's hard now to explain just how influential this game was going forward, but I will try. Into the next decade, the 1980s. It was the 1980s, the years when leg warmers were popular. The Empire struck back, and some guy named Patrick Bateman wouldn't shut up about Huey Lewis in the news. Big shift for electronic literature in the 1980s was the rise of the personal home computer becoming more commonplace, thanks to companies like IBM, Apple, and others.
Introducing Macintosh. It does all the things you'd expect a business computer to do. It does a lot of things you wouldn't expect a business computer to do. And it does some things no other business computer has ever done before.
This opened it up to more interactive fiction like text-based adventure games, as well as hypertext fiction stories to be played and read at home by the common person instead of in academic institutions by researchers. With developers such as Magnetic Scrolls and Infocom making games like The Pawn and Zork, these interactive stories would reach their peak of popularity in this decade. Going forward, interactivity is a key feature to many other pieces of electronic literature, and especially when concerning the internet and social media that would be later to come. Another important marker for electronic literature was made, specifically with hypertext fiction. In 1982, Mark Bernstein, a hypertext researcher, founded the company Eastgate Systems. Eastgate Systems was a company that sold hypertext fiction, as well as a software program called StorySpace. If you don't know what it is, hypertext fiction is a type of fiction that takes the linear form of a novel and makes it non-linear and choice-based with a series of interconnected links called hyperlinks or hypertext. Each link you click takes you to another part or section in the story. Through the StorySpace software, it made it easier for writers to make their own hypertext fiction, and many people did. Two of the most notable works of fiction made through Storyspace are Afternoon, a Story by Michael Joyce, and Patchwork Girl by Shelley Jackson. Afternoon, a Story was a complex piece of fiction that told the story of a technical writer who witnesses a car crash, which he later fears to have been his ex-wife and child that died in the crash. Patchwork Girl by Shelley Jackson, on the other hand, is another text of hypertext fiction that was written for a Brown University course, based on two books, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley and Patchwork Girl of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Patchwork Girl is a non-linear novel made up of 5 different segments: a graveyard, a journal, a quilt, a story, and broken accents. It told the story of the creation of Bride of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley herself. The creature and her creator become lovers, and after parting, the creature travels to America, living out a long life of 175 years. Spliced in between the narrative are the lives of the many women whose body parts the creature's body is made out of. It's a really interesting and intriguing story and piece of hypertext fiction, but it also serves as something of a precursor to what we'll later see on the internet: fan fiction. With these programs and the many other pieces of hypertext fiction they sold, this marked the company as the first official publishers of electronic literature. While not publishing anything new recently, they still sell and preserve their fiction on their website, with their first publication, Afternoon, a Story, priced at $24.99 as a Macintosh USB. Another interesting piece of electronic literature published in this decade is a set of poems, titled The First Screening, Computer Poems, by a man known as B.P. Nickel. Coded in BASIC, the poems are distributed amongst 100 people on floppy disks. As the Apple II became obsolete, so did access to the poetry. B.P. Nickel would pass on September 25, 1988, and after his death, with approval by his widow, Red Deer College Press would publish them on floppy disk for the Macintosh. Since then, many different formats of the poems exist now for viewing, such as the video format you're seeing now. While most of the interactive fiction and writing throughout these decades covered were mostly kept to sold computers, this would slowly change when in 1993 the World Wide Web, or what we now just refer to as the Internet, would launch to the public.
What the fuck is the Internet?
What is Internet anyway?
Internet is that
Massive computer network. Mm-hmm.
The one that's becoming really big now.
It spans the globe like a superhighway. It is called Internet.
With the internet, communication among people became easier than it ever had been in the past, as well as the ability to publish literature in new and exciting ways. Many different websites would launch for people to publish their own writings, such as the first serialized web story, The Spot, in 1995, to fanfiction.net in 1998. Constrained to now outdated internet access, such as dial-up and archaic website building in HTML, it would be a place full of creativity and bizarre writing experiments. Though the first generation was bound by the personal computer alone, the second generation is one of an early internet age where one could just begin to use audio-visual possibilities of the personal computer, as well as websites accessed through the World Wide Web. This is where the more familiar precursors of what we now think of as internet fiction came in. With the internet, you could talk in AOL chat rooms with weird creepy strangers and build weird websites where you post whatever kind of fiction you want without the limitations of trying to find a traditional publisher. From an interactive hypertext novel called Hygiroscope that won't stay on one page long enough for a reader to read it, to the first web serial that people thought was a true story, the early internet was a hive of weird and interesting experiments that would be the nesting grounds for the even weirder internet decade of the 2000s. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It took a lot of work, and I'm working on part 2 currently, so if you just want to subscribe and stay tuned for that, that'd be amazing. I appreciate it. Hope you have a good day, and again, thanks for watching.